Do the rich people cringe and say, don't tell them that, Robert?
Yes. Don't tell people what you know.
Right.
Keep them poor. My father was the head of education, PhD, all that stuff. I go home and ask him, said, why don't we learn about money in school? And he looked at me and says, because the government doesn't let us teach that subject. The government tells us what we can teach and what we can't teach. And I thought that was strange. And I said, but aren't we going to school to learn about money? He says, no, your job is to get a job. I said, but you get a job to earn money. He goes, no, you're supposed to just get a job. Isn't the purpose of a job to earn money? He goes, you're correct. I said, so why don't I just learn about money? I can skip the job part, you know?
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the NEETwork podcast, where we discuss everything NEET. With me today, as always, is my friend Theo,
How we doing, everyone?
and I'm Dexter. So let's just jump right on in.
So we took a little bit of a break to essentially write the scripts for the next episode. The next handful of episodes. We're not exactly scripted. We just kind of have show notes, but hopefully you guys understand that the research and writing for this podcast is rather time consuming, probably more so than any other step. So thank you all for being patient and waiting for the next episodes. It seems people are really enjoying the show.
If I look up NEETwork, it's actually one of the first things that pops up on YouTube now.
Awesome. Yeah, we're actually showing up in the algorithm, which is good.
Yeah, actually, recently we hit a really important milestone of 69 subs.
Nice.
So big congratulations to everybody. Thank you for being a part of that.
So, subscriber number 69 was actually Rios Gremery from the anime High School DxD. Rios, baby, slide in the Discord. We want to talk to you.
Speaking of the Discord, we'd also like to give a shout out to our first few attendants. It's nice to see you all hanging out and chatting about all things NEET.
Yeah, exactly. We've really been taken to school on crypto recently by one of our NEET hopefuls in the Discord, and we hope that more such conversation can occur in the future, hopefully with even more people.
Yeah, I think we've got about 7 people in the Discord right now, including Theo and I. So it's growing steadily.
And as we continue to grow the Discord, we'll start planning out events like watch parties and things like that. I'm not quite sure what else we can do over Discord, but I'm sure as we get more people, we'll get plenty more suggestions.
So yeah, feel free to join in. We're always looking for recommendations in the Discord if anybody has anything. So if you want to maybe influence the show a little bit, that might be a good way to go about it.
And in the recent kind of NEET news, I'm sure this is related to NEETs in some way. We discussed in a previous episode about getting your NEET bucks the possibility of starting an OnlyFans, which has apparently banned what they're deeming to be pornographic content, which is news to me because I thought the whole thing was porn.
Yeah, it seemed like a really bad business decision. Funny enough, they've already rescinded that due to pushback from its users. Because, I mean, it would effectively put them out of business.
Well, there's that, yes, but I thought the problem was, one, there is apparently a lot of trafficking going on somehow on OnlyFans. There's like people being forced against their will to make what is essentially porn. And it also was a problem with like payment processors. So I don't know exactly how they can backtrack when it's an issue kind of outside the website and a legal issue as well.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the situation to really say what the cause was, but I can say that we had a couple of NEETs really sweating there for a little while.
Yeah, I would say like the really successful OnlyFans contributors are almost certainly NEETs.
They're definitely not going out and doing anything else. I can probably say that that's their hustle.
Although, like, you don't even need to be that successful on OnlyFans to live pretty comfy. I've thought of it a couple times, not really making porn, but I was wondering maybe like recording myself working out.
Yeah, it could work out. I mean,
Maybe.
I don't need your OnlyFans for those other videos anyway.
No, you get all my videos for free, Dexter. But if you'd like to support the NEETwork in a more personal way and not via OnlyFans, consider contributing to our Patreon at patreon.com/the NEETworkPod.
And if you do want to support us through an OnlyFans, too bad.
But your kind contribution goes toward paying for things like guest appearances, paid promotions, membership to various podcasting services, and with whatever's left over, we might just buy ourselves some chicky tendies.
But anyways, you want to tell me about what we're here to talk about tonight, Theo?
Well, you should probably know by now, Dexter, I had you do a little homework for this episode of the NEETwork, which is the first episode of a little series called the NEET Book Club, where we go over not just books, but movies and other forms of media that we think contain themes regarding NEETdom. And for the first installment of the NEET Book Club, I chose a book that sort of woke me up to this lie of modern society, and that is Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert T. Kiyosaki.
Yeah, I listened to the first hour and a half. I think it's like a 2 hour, 3 hour book.
I think it's like a 6 hour audiobook. We only listened to the first hour and a half because that was the pertinent part. And we'll explain why we didn't listen to the whole thing a little bit later. But my experience with this book was I read it many, many years ago in my early 20s, and it really took a long time to kind of take the lesson to heart, because I read it and I always, like in my early 20s, I guess we're all kind of a little foolish with money in our early 20s. I always figured at some point I'll get around to doing things like investing, and I never did, but that information was always kind of in the back of my head, and only recently have I started taking Robert Kiyosaki's advice into account. And that's my experience with this book, and only recently did I read it again in preparation for this episode.
This was actually my first time ever hearing about this book. After listening to it, there's a lot of things in there. I think there's a lot of valuable advice in it. I think there's also a lot of maybe like, obviously boomerish ideals here and there.
Yes. Robert Kiyosaki is definitely a boomer and has some outdated ideas, but
I mean, he was a product of a different time, obviously, but it doesn't mean that we can't at least reference the ancient texts, so to speak.
Well, that's the whole concept of Rich Dad and Poor Dad. And the reason we only went through the first hour and a half of the book, I think it's like the first 2 or 3 chapters, is because it starts with an autobiographical account of Kiyosaki's youth and his experience with 2 men. The first man is his biological father, who is an absolute hardcore normie who worked away 40 years of his life only to be laid off at the last moment and denied a retirement pension that this man was absolutely certain he would receive.
That's so crappy. I mean, I know that there's actually been a fair number of military discharges like that.
Yes. Yeah, that absolutely happens. And that's part of like what the NEETwork is. It is standing against that kind of exploitation that they're baiting and switching people. They're promising them, "Oh, work slave away for 40 years and and you'll never have to work again when you're 60 and you won't want to do anything." And then suddenly pulling the rug out from underneath them.
But that's business, baby.
Yeah, right. The other man who was a big influence on Kiyosaki was the father of a friend of his. And this father kind of groomed Kiyosaki and his own son with the tools they needed to become wealthy in the future. And having both of these father figures allowed Robert to compare and contrast these 2 points of view, one with the mindset of a poor man and the other one with the ambition and drive of a rich man.
And I think it's an important distinction to keep in mind that at the time, neither of them were rich nor poor. There were signs that one might end up being richer than the other, but they were both roughly in bad times, so to speak, at the right moment that we're going to be referencing for the book.
Right.
So it's more of like a habitually rich.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. There are habits and mindsets that rich and poor men put themselves in that kind of lock them in place. And
And I'm not going to go down the avenue that the writer does, where it almost feels like they're blaming the poor for being poor, because I think that there's a little bit more at play there. But there are definitely things that people can do to improve their situations. So, actually, kind of going back to a point that you're mentioning earlier, where he kind of compares and contrasts ideas from multiple avenues,
mhm,
I think that's a really important thing that we should touch on is broaden your perspectives. Uh,
absolutely.
don't get like this single-minded, like, oh, well, this worked in the past, so I'm just going to keep doing this forever situation. It's really important to kind of get a wide perspective on things. Don't get locked into preconceived notions. Don't get locked into like your own ideas. It's really good. It's really like healthy for not only your brain but just you know your wallet even to kind of listen and get an idea of what other people have to say and what they think. Learning to discertain from that, like the good from the bad.
Yes, and what you said before about how, like, this is the way we've always done it, we can't do it any other way, is a very normie idea, but just because normies and boomers have very outdated ideas doesn't mean they're all bad ideas necessarily. Don't just throw it away because someone you don't like said it.
Yeah.
It's kinda like if it's stupid but it works, it isn't stupid, maybe? Something like that. Early in the book, Kiyosaki states that most children learn about money from home, and that, I mean, it makes sense, right?
Right. A lot of your traits, a lot of your kind of common sense, so to speak, comes from your interactions with your folks and your siblings, if you have any.
Right. So it makes sense that Kiyosaki's early education about money comes from his poor dad, and Kiyosaki's biological father is definitely what we here at the NEETwork call a normie. His dad preaches the virtue of the normie narrative we've talked about before, which is stay in school to get good grades so you'll get let into a good college so you can then get a good job.
Going back to the point where we were talking about him learning about economics from his family, I would say money is one of those things that everybody should learn. Like, if not at a college, at least away from the family, kind of get a multi perspective. That's one of those things that I think is most important. I would even recommend maybe not necessarily a college degree, but like taking some kind of formal class over economics is really valuable.
That isn't a bad idea.
Because I mean, as much as we, kind of preach the virtue of not following the narrative, the go to college aspect, I would also say that it's kind of valuable to at least get some kind of trade skill or trade knowledge in basic economics.
Yeah, it absolutely. You have to know the rules of the game in order to play it.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, exactly as you're saying, you can't really take advantage of the system if you don't even know how the hell it works.
But the problem is you have to go seek that knowledge because school makes no effort whatsoever to teach students about how money works, and instead focusing on information that pretty much everyone accepts will be forgotten the moment we all graduate.
Yeah, school doesn't really do much beyond your core classes, which some of it's interesting, some of it's important, but I wouldn't say that all of it's important. I haven't personally used like anything that I learned from Algebra 2. I use not that much of my math. Um, and I even work in an area that, at least to a degree, uses mathematics. Another thing I want to talk about is you mentioned his kind of normie mindset. I kind of wanted to elaborate on this. I wouldn't say it's even like a normie. It's almost like a defeatist mindset towards money.
Yes, it is very defeatist. Well, Kiyosaki does talk about that, and we'll probably get to that in a moment.
Yeah, yeah. I think that uh, when we kind of talk about the other dad's influence, we can talk about the different in mindset.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I guess that makes a good segue into the rich dad. And today having two dads means growing up in a gay household, but Kiyosaki means that he simply had two major father figures in his life growing up, and his rich quote unquote dad was the father of a close friend of his who was kind enough to take both of them under his wing and guide them into a wealthy lifestyle. And this is where you're talking about where in talking about Rich Dad early in the book, Kiyosaki notes that Rich Dad forbade the words, "I can't afford that," and instead encourages the thought of, "How can I afford that?"
This is kind of where mindset comes really in play. I think this applies, outside of this even. I mean, I was a collegiate athlete for a while, and you notice the difference between someone who is like, "This is too hard," and someone who's like, "Oh yeah, I got this." You know,
Right. Well, like, was there any moment in your training where you, let's see, how am I trying to word this? Where you would like maybe where you might ask, "How can I beat my time? Where can I improve?" Whereas another one of your teammates might have said, "I can't possibly beat that time."
I wouldn't say that my teammates ever said like they couldn't possibly beat it, but a lot of them said like things along the lines of like, "I never thought I would have done that. That's like crazy. That's so fast." Or watching other people swim, they would say something along the line of like, "These people are nuts." Setting in their mind that the opponent is way more talented than we are.
Interesting.
Yeah, but kind of getting over this thing where mindset is very important. I think this applies just to everyone's daily life. Uh, you can learn a lot about somebody just by listening to what they think and how they think. I mean, I know even my dad uh, is kind of like the "how can I do this?"
Yes, and I find personally I've, applied this mindset to my music where it's like I feel like I've hit a bit of a wall here. What am I supposed to be learning right now? And that's just what I'm trying to figure out. It's not like I'm not getting any better. Maybe I'm just not that good at music. It's what should I be focusing on instead of maybe learning to play a particular song, something like that. And I haven't quite figured that out, but I'm trying to figure that out.
That's where I'm at in my Japanese as well. Um, I've kind of got the alphabets figured out, but now I'm kind of having a hard time picking up like what to do next.
The first of like I can't afford that or I've hit a wall, that is a statement that closes the mind. And when you ask yourself instead, how can I afford that? How can I improve my time in swimming or my music? That is a question that forces you to look critically at the situation. And that is something Poor Dad does very often.
Yeah, poor dad adopts a defeatist mindset where basically he justifies not being able to do something by just like, I just don't have the money, I can't do it. Whereas the rich dad, yeah, the rich dad doesn't justify it. What he does is ask why he can't.
And Rich Dad often throughout like the book takes these kind of common normie tropes and turns them on their head where like the normie trope would be study hard so you can find a good company to work for, but Rich Dad states it as study hard so you can find a good company to buy.
I mean, to be fair, I think that this does take a little bit of a mental jump You have to, have capital in the first place to do that.
There is a bit of that, yeah.
But yeah, Rich Dad, a lot of the things he says kind of, and this is where I kind of sympathize with the Poor Dad
Hmm.
perspective. Rich Dad takes a lot of things for granted, like you're gonna have that money up front.
Yeah, there's that statement, "It takes money to make money." Part of me does kind of think that that is another justification for not using the money you have to like put the money to work for you, as the book states it. The book never really explains where Rich Dad gets his money to invest.
Yeah, I was under the impression that they both didn't have any money.
Yeah, exactly. That they were both kind of.
Somehow, Rich Dad already owns like a couple of franchises.
But this was at a point where, like, let's see, I think Rich Dad owned a couple of uh essentially Circle K's or convenience store type places. So by the time Kiyosaki discovers him, he's already kind of on his way. He's bought a couple of what the book calls assets that are putting money in his pocket.
I guess it's fair to say, Poor Dad probably spent a good portion of his money on multiple college degrees, whereas Rich Dad, I think they stated it in the book, didn't even graduate high school.
I think the book says, yes, you are correct. Poor Dad did have multiple college degrees, and Rich Dad, I don't think even made it to high school. I think the book says Rich Dad actually dropped out after the 8th grade.
Yeah, I believe that he didn't even make it that far.
Hmm. So it's that I've been seeing this meme on YouTube of the Sigma male grind set. So my assumption is probably something like Rich Dad might have been spending that time grinding out the money to purchase his first handful of assets rather than essentially going to school full time but without pay to learn how to be a college student.
Assuming they both had the same capital available to them in middle school, and high school. One spent it on college degrees, and the other one spent it on buying a 7-Eleven, basically. So I guess I can see where that money's coming from.
In your independent financial education, I think Rich Dad Poor Dad is a really good book to begin with when kind of beginning your journey to financial independence, because it reveals the lie that we've all been told about how to be successful, but does it in a digestible way. And just as important is the second two-thirds of the book, which discuss the basic methods to pursue wealth. Like we said, the first hour and a half is an autobiographical account of Kiyosaki and his first kind of money-making attempts.
Yeah, it feels like a borderline narrative in the first hour and a half that I listened to. I remember the first story that he gave off was him and his friend Mike were collecting a whole bunch of toothpaste tubes and melting down the lead that was in them, which kind of a fascinating side note that toothpaste tubes were made of lead. Seems a little dangerous to me, but
This was the 50s.
yeah, I guess everything was made of lead and radiation in the 50s.
Yeah, lead, asbestos. I believe I vaguely remember someone telling me they used gasoline to clean things back then. Oh, the 50s, what a magical time. So much better than the modern age.
They were taking the lead out of those toothpaste tubes and turning them into nickels, which, that's kind of a fascinating little side story.
I think what's kind of noteworthy, at least in my case, is the fact that his mom tries to put the kibosh on this operation.
Yeah, before it even gets like up and running.
Right. And it reminds me of the times when my own mother, who is very much like Poor Dad in this story, has shot down a lot of my own ambitions. And I was a real obedient kid, so usually I listened to her, but it was like no matter how reasonable the ambition was, it was always, you can't do that. My dog is snorting. It was always, you can't do that. That's not a real job. I guess if I can make an example, when I was in my late teens, I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a novelist. And keep in mind that this was the era of amateur writers becoming millionaires from their books. This was the era of J.K. Rowling and Stephanie Meyer and Christopher Paolini, writing pretty amateurish books. This wasn't these books aren't the result of like years of honing the craft. These were just like, in so many words, these people shat out their first book and made $1 million. But she said, and this is the most support I ever got for ambitions, was like, don't do that. Instead, do this other thing that's vaguely related to it. So her words, it was like, don't be a novelist. You should go to school to be a journalist. That's where the real money is. That was her line of thinking.
So this is where the multiple perspectives kind of comes into play, where it's important to have multiple people's thoughts on things.
Right, but throughout my life, it was basically all of the adults saying the same thing. Anyway, also noteworthy about this story is the poor dad's words, where he encourages them, actually. He says, "You're only poor if you give up," which echoes the sentiment of motivation back in our NEET Hustle episode.
Kind of jumping back to his mom giving him the kibosh on that also takes me back to my first hustle. When I was growing up, I was like kind of trudging around our yard, kind of taking things and crafting stuff out of them and trying to sell it.
All right.
None of it was particularly great stuff, but I would try to sell it anyway, and I got kiboshed by my parents for that.
Hmm. Well, like, what was the reason they put the kibosh on it?
Uh, I might have been a little pushy.
Oh, to like sell it to your parents.
Sell it to my parents, sell it to the neighbors. It was like, no, you're not gonna hawk all this garbage.
Yeah, and I mean, I can kind of understand, as little kids, we maybe don't have the best business ideas, but there is a point where, like, I don't know, there's a point where the adults in your life are kind of shutting everything down and telling you to pursue one very specific avenue of life.
Right, and I mean, I still get the craving to like craft something every now and then, but now I don't have any of the skills.
Right.
It feels like I'm gonna go in, and generate a Sonichu level of craft.
I mean, hell, Sonichu isn't even that well made, but if Chris really did, it always goes back to Chris Chan, doesn't it? If Chris Chan like knuckled down and actually made Sonichu, he could make a comfy living off of it.
Well, not anymore.
Not anymore. He's got a little something else. He's got bigger fish to fry. He's got bigger villains to zap. After this whole essentially counterfeit nickel factory fiasco, Robert and his friend Mike go to meet with his dad, Mike's dad, that is, who agrees to give them a financial education. And the very first lesson comes during this meeting, where the rich dad, as it were, basically says, take it or leave it. You'll work for me for, I believe it was 10 cents an hour, like ridiculously low pay, 3 hours on Saturday. And they kind of, Robert and his friend are kind of hesitant to take it at first. And the rich dad is like, take it or leave it. And the first lesson is opportunities come and go, and sacrifice is necessary to become financially independent sometimes. In this case, Robert was sacrificing his Saturday baseball game.
Right. He was sacrificing like 3 hours on his Saturdays.
And when you're a kid, those weekends are precious.
I'm an adult. My weekends are precious.
Actually, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Weekends, period, are precious if you're a working normie or a little kid going to school. And they take the deal. They end up taking it, but Mike's dad starts in a weird way. They talk about how Mike's dad isn't interested in just lecturing to them like they get in school. And Mike's dad, for lack of a better term, basically recruits them into the exploitation of traditional employment. 10 cents an hour for a few hours every weekend on Saturdays. And even in the 50s, where I think this takes place, this is unbelievably low.
Yeah, I think even poor dad was upset.
Yeah, poor dad was real mad. But this was the second lesson in that working and allowing yourself to be pushed around is not the path to success. The successful get angry and push back, but it's also important to know who or what to push back against. And pushing back against your boss tends to get you fired. And the big takeaway that Rich Dad was going for is that a poor person would have pushed for more money, so like a raise or a promotion or something. But the intent was that one shouldn't just be sated simply by having more money, noting that most normies, upon coming into more money, will simply spend it away. And this is what everyone, including normies, call the rat race.
Right. There's a quote from the book. Actually, it was something along the lines of like, most people only talk and dream of getting rich, which I think is really important to focus on for this, because people lose sight of things really fast when money starts to kind of flow, right? There's a part in the book where the guy starts offering the kids a raise. It's like a $1 raise. And the kids are like, nope, not taking it. $2. Nope, not taking it. $5. Everyone's eyes get big. Everything is like, time stops.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine like Dragon Ball Z power level, like, you know how they get that kind of glow around themselves? It's like the rich dad is like $1 raise, and then it's like the glow appears around him, $2, and it gets even bigger.
Yeah, I mean, he's slowly becoming Super Saiyan 10. But yeah, I think that's, people focus on the money aspect of it, but really there's no enrichment there because, it all goes to taxes anyway. And then another line that I thought was really important that kind of pertains to this is the people exploit themselves. Really important to focus on. Kind of interesting to think of it from like he's a business owner perspective, right?
Mhm.
In the end, the people choose to stay employed. They accept the cash offer. It's actually really interesting. A lot of people just seem complacent with what's offered to them and will rarely fight for anything more. Um, However, we're starting to see a change in that in these kind of unprecedented times where, like, it's an employment crisis. People are like threatening to leave, and businesses can't afford that anymore. Another thing that was mentioned in it was something along the lines of like, the rich don't pay taxes.
Yeah. Isn't that scummy? Like, the rich are basically in charge of the system and have set up the system in such a way that they benefit the most. Going back a little bit to that you choose to be employed mindset, I definitely had this mindset in my early 20s as I was basically just kind of accepting. At this time I was in the military. I was just kind of accepting life in the military and not doing anything. You really can't do anything about it, but I was making a good amount of money and actually putting quite a bit of it away. I could have started investing during those times, but I never had the wherewithal to do so. Most of my days in the Air Force, I spent just kind of in an office. I could have used that time really to study the financial markets and like stocks and stuff. And but then again, if not for that, then I wouldn't be here on the NEETwork talking about it probably. I would off be enjoying my wealth.
You would become the time thief, the Chad time thief.
I actually was the Chad time thief in the military, I'm not gonna lie.
Versus the virgin hard worker.
Because I was aircrew, like, what does an aircrew do when he's not flying? But we still had to come into the office to work.
Right, because military gives you that like hard schedule. I mean, I'm kind of encountering that at my work as well, where it's I finish all my work on like Mondays, and then I have 3 days where like work slowly trickles in. And like my last Thursday, it was like bad. I got everything done before 10,
Wow, and you just had to stay there until 4 o'clock? Or even 5 o'clock?
and I had to stay there till 4:30. And I was just kind of like, I feel kind of bad, but I think that's just kind of been programmed into me to feel bad about it.
Right, well, but you essentially have wasted away an entire day that you could have been doing something else,
Yeah, so
building some other skill, but you had to be in the office.
I was just kind of sitting there, basically, is what it felt like.
Yeah, exactly. But this whole hour and a half anecdote at the beginning of Rich Dad Poor Dad ends with Mike and Robert founding their first hustle, a comic book library. It's actually like a pretty good system they set up.
It was a pretty entertaining setup, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. They got free comic books from the store, and then I guess set up a room somewhere and put one of their little sisters in charge of actually watching the room and charged people essentially time to be in this library for an hour or two, and they could read as much as they wanted for such and such amount of money. And for a little kid hustle, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah, they're making pretty decent money. I can respect it. They were getting the comics from like the store owner who would basically chop the tops off of them to get like a refund or something. And then they'd throw the rest of the comic away. So they'd basically collect those comics that were getting thrown away and ask if, they could keep them. And the guy was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever, you just can't sell it." And so they technically weren't selling it, but they were still making money off of it.
Very interesting point is that they were getting these comics for free. It didn't require any financial investment on their part,
Right. And I kind of like the idea of kids playing with semantics like that.
right? Well, they did that at first too when they were counterfeiting nickels. Oh, we're making money, right, Dad? That's like some Sandlot level kind of business almost. Like if they were to make a sequel to the Sandlot, that would be something I could see them doing.
Other than that, you got anything else?
Well, we only talked about maybe the first hour and a half of the book. The rest of the book goes on to kind of discuss the basics of financial literacy and how to get a better handle on your money. And interestingly enough, a lot of the points in this book are discussed in our first Neat Bucks episode. But other than that, not really. I think with that, I'd like to thank everyone for listening all the way through to the end. And if you like what you heard, you can help us grow in a few ways. We're still pretty small and always trying to grow the audience, so if you have friends who might be interested in the neat work, let them know about us. Any boost to our signal helps, and we treasure every single new subscriber. And in that same vein, we're trying to build a supportive community of like-minded neats and neat hopefuls, so consider taking a look at the Neat Discord, where all things neat are discussed. When we've grown the Discord a bit, we plan on having special events like watch parties and anything else we can think of on the Discord.
If you're listening on the Podbean, leave a like and consider downloading the episode. If you're listening on YouTube, you can like, subscribe, and leave a comment to help out the algorithm. It only takes a moment, and you're helping out a lot more than you think. The links to all these are in the description below.
And with that, I'd like to say good night and stay comfy, Dexter.
Stay comfy, Theo.